So, one of the things that I see people struggle with is the concept of tithing. And I finally realized, I know what's going on here. So, there's, as always, multiple layers. But one of the things from my background, I'm a paralegal, and I realized that in a large sense, the Bible is essentially a contract, um, like an actual contract. And the thing about a contract is that both parties, for a contract to be valid, generally speaking, I'm not an attorney, blah, blah, blah. For a contract to be valid between two parties, each party has to give consideration. They have to essentially give something of value into the contract to the other person for the contract to be valid. So, generally speaking, that might be one person gives money and another person gives services. And then you would have a contract. The services have value, the money has value. Both parties have given something of value. The contract has consideration from both parties. Therefore, the contract is valid. Well, what can you give God? God doesn't really need anything. Well, the interesting thing is, it doesn't have to be something that he needs. It just has to be something that is valuable to the giver. So there's that story in the New Testament where this woman basically she gives an, the tiniest amount of money, but it's almost everything she has, or it's everything she has. And Jesus comes to her defense and is like, no, she gave more than people who gave more money because she gave everything she had. Why would that be important? Because the value of it that she was giving was more than the value of it that the wealthier person was giving, even though the technical amount was more money. And from a worldly realm perspective, it's worth more. From God's perspective, she was giving more, and therefore it was more valuable than what the other person was giving. The other thing is that, okay, I was helping this homeless lady for a while, like multiple years. And I realized one, I could never give enough because I thought, well, I don't need a tithe. I give plenty. I realized not only could I never give enough, it would never, whatever I gave her, it was never going to be enough, but also that she didn't think I deserved what I had and should give her more. There was never a limit where it was like, oh my gosh, yes, this person has given me enough that I feel like it's sufficient. That she's given me a sufficient amount. It was literally never enough. And I went, oh, when it's routed through the house of the Lord, it comes from the Lord. No one's expecting one person. The other thing too that ended up happening was as I said, she didn't think I deserved what I had, that she needed it more. Um and that she basically, the more she learned about me, the more she started to hate me. Whereas like if you get close to a person and it's in a healthy way, the more you learn about them, the more you like them and give them the benefit of the doubt. But because she was coming at it from a transactional perspective, she was mad that I was in the way of getting what she wanted. It She didn't consider it as being mine and I was doing like trying to help. I was basically the impediment for her getting everything that she wanted. Now, I have a child that I'm responsible for, not just legally, but morally. That person I'm responsible for and too. So, me giving this person everything she wants compromises my ability to provide for my child. It wasn't reasonable. It was not a reasonable expectation. And I went, oh, this is another reason why we tithe. Because when people think that we have, like, I don't want to say people, when unhealthy people think that we have feel entitled to, they feel we should give more. The other thing too is no one person can meet all of their needs. generally. Like, I'm not like a millionaire. I'm just a regular person. But from her perspective, I might as well be a millionaire. It doesn't matter that I'm just sitting in, my little working class home with not, I'm not fancy or anything like that. But from her perspective, I might as well be a millionaire. So I was like, oh, we route it to the house of the Lord. So it comes from the Lord. It comes from the house of the Lord. We're not looking to one person and then getting mad when they don't give more. You can only give what you have to give. And I really wrestled with this because I had mislearned as a Christian that you should just keep giving. And I was like, but I have a responsibility to my son, who's a minor child that I brought into this world, whose life I am responsible for. That is when I discovered the concept of stewardship. And I was like, oh, okay. So when you tithe to the house of the Lord, when the house of the Lord feeds people, it's coming from the house of the Lord. It's coming from God. God who can supply everything that we need. It just may not come through one person. Maybe it comes from many. There's also, is it Micah? No, Malachi. God basically gives like a promise about tithing that ties into this. He says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Malachi 3:10. Basically, God says, what you give, what you tithe to me will absolutely come back to you. And there's a different Bible verse where he says, that if you give to the poor, you're a lender on behalf of God and he'll repay you um, probably more than you gave. I don't know that one off the top of my head. But there is this idea of the economy of heaven. When we are giving our tithe so that God can distribute it, participating in the economy of heaven so that God's kingdom is active on earth as his house. So the church or the temple or wherever that is supporting people in the community, that it's coming as if from God. It is spreading his kingdom. It is providing for people who need provision. And finally, and I'm not saying these are the only three things, I'm just saying these are the only three things that I'm talking about. Um, there's the concept of first fruits that's repeated throughout the Bible. I find a lot of Christians are not really firm on Old Testament Judaism, and so they miss a lot of what is happening. In the Bible, part of what God requires is that you give him the first fruits of your increase. Um, you give him the first fruits of your increase. So in Exodus, they consecrate the firstborn of both the animals and the Israelites. They consecrate them to God. And I've talked about that in another video in terms of like how it gives them permission and dominion, in this physical realm. But it also essentially is first fruits. It is a gift to God. And then what does God do with that gift? He multiplies it. That's what Jesus does all throughout the Bible. He takes what little people give him and he multiplies it so that all have what they need. All have provision, all have food, all have bread, all have wine. So giving to God, he multiplies so that everyone can have enough and what they need. I like to, part of it also though, however, is that there is this idea of the rapture in certain Christian uh sects. Not all Christians believe in the rapture. I actually ended up, I happen to believe in the rapture because I had like two very vivid, more real than real life rapture experiences. And so when I went to go look it up, I was like, what the heck was that? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, that's what that is. So I'm going to be real upfront. That's what I think. I think that is factual. the harpazo of it all. But when part of the point of the rapture is that the first fruits of increase are given from Jesus to Yahweh. So again, back to this discussion I've been having in the other videos of a lot of representational magic occurring, not magic, but a representational physical anchor for spiritual realities. A lot of the things that are occurring in the Old Testament, or even in the New Testament, they are representations in the physical realm of spiritual reality, or things that you want to anchor in the physical realm because you want it to be a spiritual reality. And so tithing is one of those things. So once I realized, like, oh, if I tithe, I participate in God's economy. Also, I make sure I'm in a covenant relationship with Yahweh, who is the one who enforces the covenant. If you go back and you look at the agreement that God makes with I want to say it's Abraham. He makes an agreement with someone where it's a flaming torch that walks through the split animals. That is how they used to do the covenant back in the day. They didn't, there wasn't an abundance of paper and writing utensils and like attorneys and stuff like that. People would make an agreement. There'd be a ritual. They would cut animals in half, and then the person who was the lower status person would walk through the pieces because they were saying, they would be held responsible if we failed the covenant. Well, humankind failed the covenant, but humankind's not the one who walked through the pieces. In the story, it's God. It's this floating torch. God is the one who sacrifices if humans break the covenant. And so Jesus, coming from in the New Testament, being sacrificed as man and God, he's fulfilling that. So we broke it, but God himself paid it. But also God himself enforces the covenant. It's really, like, from a legal perspective, to me, it's like just so elegant. It also, we are multiplying what one person alone cannot give. And we are giving back to the source of all of our blessings. He needs nothing, but he takes it anyway. And he turns it into joy and gladness and provision. And just sort of on a side note, it also makes me think of singing, because it seems weird at first when you're an atheist. You're like, why God? Why are you so megalomaniacal? You need people singing to you all the time. Well, if you're an all-powerful creator who knows everything, omnipotent, omniscient, whatever the other one is, what can anyone give you? You don't need anything. But anyone can sing to the Lord. You can have nothing in your hand. You have nothing to offer the Lord but your praise, a song, a love, contrite heart. And the Lord, the fact that the God of the Bible like values those things is truly incredible to me. And it reminds me of how, like, a parent, if you have a kid who gives you a little stone that they found, they'll cherish that stone. That stone they don't need that stone. It doesn't technically have any value to a parent, but they treasure it. It's beautiful to them because their child saw something and thought of them and wanted to share it in this very pure, innocent, loving way. And so I think that tithing is so much more than this, like, requirement that sometimes it is made out to be. It is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to be in a covenant with God. And when you are in a covenant with God, he enforces the covenant, and it's always for your benefit at his expense. I can't think of really any contract on earth that we do that does that. Anyway, I hope this makes sense. And I'll talk to you next time.